What's the Jeanne Dielman with airline food?
That's pretty good.
I'm Wilson Lai.
I'm Benjamin Yap.
I'm Eli Sands.
You're listening to Deep Cut.
On Deep Cut, we compare a director's most popular film with a personal favorite chosen by one of us.
We also discuss that director's life and career to bring in context that helps us view their movies as they may want us to.
If you're enjoying the show, please rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to help others discover the show. Better still, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or comment on episodes directly on Spotify. You can also keep up with us on Instagram and Letterboxd at Deep Cut Pod and join our Discord to chat with us and other listeners. We also have a Patreon if you'd like to support us. Find links to all of these via the link in the description or go to deepcutpod.com.
So before we begin our discussion on, I'm about to butcher this in French, Jeanne Dielman, 23 qui de commerce, 1020 Bruxelles.
Nailed it.
Did not nail it. Which came out in 1975.
I didn't realize you were also going to do the numbers in French.
Hell yeah. You know what's the most interesting thing about French counting? When you say 1080, they say 1080, which means 420.
What?
Huh.
1,000.
So 80 in French?
420?
Yes, 80 in French is 420s.
Wow.
Dude.
It's the weirdest thing.
Is that only for 80?
Yeah, just 80.
Weird.
French people.
Not how I would have designed the language. But you know, the other ironic thing is that she lives at 1080 and this film was not filmed in 1080p HD.
I felt that coming.
That was good.
Yep.
I appreciated that one.
Waiting
Eli.
to say that one.
Maybe she knew. Maybe she knew that that's where HD was going to come in.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway, this was supposed to be the spoiler warning. We're going to spoil this movie. We're going to talk about the ending, which is like the most spoiler part of the film. But also it's 201 minutes. So if you're not going to watch the film, you're not going to watch the film. So you should go watch the film and find out what the deal is. And find out why. The biggest context is that it is currently the greatest film of all time as voted on the Sight and Sound Critics poll. What does that mean? I guess we'll talk a little bit about that. So maybe before I do a little context, which has been a while since I've done that, maybe let's just talk about our experience watching this film and learning about Chantal Akerman and her work. I will volunteer.
Thank you.
The first Akerman I saw was Jeanne Dielman, which I saw very recently. I want to say a month or two ago. After that, I actually haven't really seen that many other Akermans, but I think in the last 2 weeks, I've been trying to pick up and watch a few more just to get a little bit more context about her career. And also, we'll probably try and watch a few more as we cover a few of her films in this series. And of course, we are starting a kind of series on Chantal Akerman's work, which felt kind of time to do it, considering the recent poll. And it felt like we should throw a bit of our hat in the ring a little bit to talk about this seminal work. So yeah, I watched it at AFA, so I had the full screen experience. And I will say that Akerman does not make films for entertainment. And I think that's a very critical point. Although she does try to do that later in her career, which I can get into a little bit later. But her chief goal is to give you a feeling that she has, or to express some kind of meaning. And so she's using the cinematic tools to do that. And I find that very interesting. Do I particularly enjoy watching Jeanne Dielman? No, and I think that's not the point. And I find that to be interesting because it makes it a bit more difficult to maybe discuss in relation to other films. You kind of can dissect it, and it's obviously a very rich text for dissection. But in terms of comparing it with, like, I don't know, if you, even comparing it to like a Tsai Ming Liang, which is also slow, but like different. You know, like the Tsai Ming Liang is also a bit slow, but it also is trying to entertain in a kind of deadpan way, maybe.
Yeah,
you know, or
agreed.
like do some kind of nostalgia. But here, she's doing something quite almost argumentative as a video essay through a fictional kind of storytelling and through the film form. And I find that It's interesting, and it's also very interesting that this is currently number one in the Science Sound poll, because if someone's like, hey, yeah, tell me your greatest films all the time, and you say Godfather and they watch it and they're going to enjoy that. You say Jeanne Dielman and they watch it, they'll slap you in the face, right? They'll be like, what do you just ask me to watch? And I think there's a bit of tension thinking about that in the kind of realm of rating films, Letterboxd and all that, because how do you size up this film with another film? How important is it for a film to be important and to say something important or do something kind of innovative, which this does? And how do you square that with, is this that much better than something entertaining, like a French musical like The Young Girls of Rochefort? You know what I mean? Which just happens to be on my mind right now. But I find that to be interesting. And I think it kind of reminds you that films are their own thing. And for Akerman especially, like, she's just trying to express something from her point of view, her perspective. And I find it to be a very rich text to mine from. And after doing some research today, even more fascinating to think about. Bottom line, film was boring, and that's why it's good. Confusing.
Well, my relationship with Chantal Akerman began actually quite a few years ago in 2018. So I was doing a summer internship in Shenzhen with a bunch of other Wesleyan students, all film kids. We were working at a production studio, and one of our dear friends, Joseph Eusebio. This is like, the 10th time that I've shouted him out. And he definitely does not listen to the podcast, because if he had listened to any of those episodes, he would have heard me shouting him out.
Yeah, fuck you. Fuck you, Joseph. Maybe this is the one he listens to.
Maybe. Well, in that case, welcome, Joseph. But Joseph and I were both on the programming team at the Wesleyan Film Series, and in Shenzhen, during that time we were there, we started programming a film series over there, and he had chosen Golden 80s, which was a musical about consumerism, I guess, or like shopping-ish. I'm not... I was very confused, and I just don't think it connected with me. I would be very, very happy to revisit it after watching a few other Akermans. But then I followed that up with News from Home a few years later and was really blown away by that in a just very moving movie. And it felt very personal. And it's interesting because, Ben, you were like, oh, there's nothing to compare it to. But I think with News from Home, I was like feeling a lot of Varda from that. Like, film as personal diary, not meant to be seen by audiences, but mainly as a way to get your feelings out. And I think News from Home felt a lot like that. And then in 2023, Hong Kong was screening Jeanne Dielman in theaters after the poll. And I went to see it once and then was blown away by that experience. And the film was closing a week later. So I was like, I have to see it one more time before it leaves cinemas. Because when is the next time that I'll be able to like see this in the cinema?
When it wins the 2022 Sight and Sound poll. 4 years later.
But not less than 1 week later, I was in a cinema again for those 200 plus minutes, watching her peel potatoes and do housework and finally become enraged by it all. And I was riveted. I was still riveted the second time that I watched it, which is I think a big testament to the filmmaking. It is boring, but it's also riveting at the same time. I think we can talk about that a lot more as we dive deeper into the film. But I like the way that this movie moves through time is fascinating. And I think we should be talking about that a little more.
Actually, the Varda is so interesting because the research really reminded me of Varda, because not only is she a filmmaker, she's also a thinker, a public person. You know, the way that Varda was, because some of the other filmmakers, they tend to like kind of disappear behind the art. But Varda and Akerman both are people at the forefront of their own art. And so you get a really strong sense of them as people, and you really can really fall in love with them as people. Akerman is like, compared to Varda, very cranky. Very cranky, and I love her for that. And she is a straight shooter. She'll tell you exactly what she thinks. And completely assured of the kind of person that she is and the kinds of films that she wants to make. Even when she tries to make a musical, even when she tries to make a mainstream commercial comedy, like, she is still very much herself, and she does not capitulate to other people ever. And it's really similar to Varda in a way, but like way more abrasive. Whereas Varda is more like a sweet old lady kind of vibe. And she's always been sweet even when she wasn't old. So I think they're kind of like similar, but also different. Sorry, Eli, you just saw this recently.
No, I agree. And you know, my trajectory with Akerman is going to support what you just said, Ben. I watched No Home Movie, which is her final film about her relationship with her mother in a very direct way, in that both her and her mother are on camera towards the end of her mother's life. Back in maybe around 2018, 2019 as well. And I found that to be a very touching movie. And I knew right away that I wanted to explore more of Akerman's work. And she's been floating on our potential deep cut canon list for a long time. I hadn't watched any further of her work until seeing Jeanne Dielman for this episode. And it was interesting to have No Home Movie as my frame of reference, because right away I was thinking about the question of how much is Jeanne Dielman an analog for her own mother. And I think the answer is probably significantly so. So I really respond to art that gives me an impression of who the creator is. And I do feel that consistently across one of her earliest films and her final film. Now, similarly to Ben, did I enjoy watching Jeanne Dielman? No, and that's not the point. I think for me, I'm impressed by how it uses minute, tiny grammatical changes in the edit, in the mise en scène, in performance to communicate a character change. And I see it as in line with second wave feminist thinking about the restrictions placed upon women by working in the home. Side note, we're recording this on Mother's Day in America. Interestingly.
Yes.
Mother's Day here too.
Happy Mother's Day,
Mother's
Mom.
Day here in Asia as well.
And though it introduces those ideas, they don't feel novel in 2025, but part of taking this movie on its own terms, I think, is viewing it from the lens of 1977, when this type of slow cinema and that type of second wave feminist thinking, although late in second wave feminism, it's still relatively novel in terms of public discourse. So I think an interesting question for me then is, why does this win the 2022 Sight and Sound poll if it's not necessarily novel now, and it's certainly not entertaining, but it still has that formal mastery? I would be curious to hear from critics who ranked it number one, what it projects about cinema as an art form in the year 2022.
I think Jeanne Dielman has been on that list further down the 100 for a while. It's just been climbing, and it just somehow climbed all the way to number one. And I think there's a confluence of factors that's happening, which is like, you have to remember the people who vote on this, they're mostly critics. People who are championing the power of cinema, what cinema can do, and the novelty of cinema. So Jeanne Dielman today is just as novel as it was in 1975. That kind of slow cinema maybe didn't exist so popularly then, but it just had this like outsized impact for some reason. And I think championing Jeanne Dielman is championing the ability for cinema to still be new. And also, I think putting a woman on the top of the list also champions that perspective. Or it also is kind of a vote to kind of reduce the maleness of the canon, I think, definitely. So I think there's a lot of these confluence of factors that kind of push it to that number one spot.
It's just interesting to me that a very easily agreed upon message that a woman's life should not be spent working entirely for the sake of her children, to the exclusion of everything else. That a movie with that message from 77 becomes the pick of representing cinema and female filmmaking in 2022, like roughly post Me Too, with the admission that there are female-directed movies that are far more radical, formally and in message, that maybe just haven't been as widely consumed.
I mean, I would say that this one is also pretty radical in form.
Yeah, I would push back against your thing saying that it wasn't radical.
Oh, no, I don't. I'm not saying it's not radical, but...
You're saying there's things that are more radical, possibly.
And also one that shows female suffering as opposed to like a News from Home, also by Akerman.
I think it's because not only is it about a female experience, it's also about extremely mundane female experience. About, I think it's radical in its mundanity. And that's why it feels a little bit more maybe knowable. Because not only is it showing you something you already know, it's showing you something you already know in a form of film you've never seen. And I think that's the thing that's very interesting about it.
In a way that makes you feel that boredom quite viscerally.
Yeah. Before we get too deep into this, because we're starting to get there, which is very interesting, I'm going to run through some context quickly about Akerman and her life, a little bit about her career, and then I'll do a little summary about the film, which is going to be very short, even though the film's very long. And then we can talk about all this stuff. Chantal Akerman, she's a Belgian filmmaker, born in Brussels, Belgium, on the 6th of June, 1950. And I think very importantly, she is born to Jewish Holocaust survivors. Her mother was in Auschwitz, and her mother's parents were actually killed in the concentration camps. And I think this is the most important thing to know about Akerman, that her mother is at the center of every single thing that she has made. And she has said that verbally herself, that she has realized that all her work has actually stemmed from her mother. And I think once you know that, you understand Akerman more clearly, and you also understand the trajectory of her life, because tragically, Akerman takes her own life in 2015, like about 1 year after her own mother passes away, because she reaches this state of depression because she realized that her mother is the most important person in her life. The moment that fell away, and the fact that that also was connected to her career, you can maybe make a conjecture that there's some relation there. Obviously, she never really said it. You wouldn't know, but there's a very clear kind of correlation where her mother and their life is so connected to also her career as a filmmaker and the things that she wanted to say about the women's experience, filtered through her thoughts about her experience, as well as the experience that she sees from her mother, and also because she spent a lot of time with her aunts and stuff. So seeing those experiences as well of that generation. I think if you want to know any context about Akerman, that's like the most important one. And so many of her films are literally about her mother. Second critical thing, Akerman was gay. And very interestingly, something that is not really, I think, broadly talked about, even though it's suffused in a lot of her work. I never realized this until I was watching some of the stuff, and I was like, wait a minute, she's gay. And then I was reading, I was like, yeah, that she is gay, but she doesn't talk about it a lot. Because there's this thing that she says in this documentary I saw, which is that she never wanted her films to go to women's festivals or queer film festivals because she didn't want them to be kind of put into those categories. She wanted them to just be cinema, and she only wanted to be put alongside other things. And I can understand completely where she comes from, not wanting to have her work be put in a corner. She wanted it to stand alongside every other kind of work, which is a very... totally agree with her.
And we're saying that she disavowed the label feminism as well. Like, she would chafe against me contextualizing her in second wave feminism.
I think it's fair to say that her work is related to feminism, but it's not done with a feminist kind of agenda.
Yeah.
Outrightly. She's just like, I want to center women's stories, which she does a lot in almost all of her work. But it's because she wants to present something that she knows. She knows these stories, so she presents them. So a lot of her work is about women characters, female characters, and their lives. Jeanne Dielman being the chief example of this, right? Formatively, she also spent a year or two living in New York City when she was younger. She saw Jean-Luc Godard's Pierrot Le Fou from 1965 in a theater at 15, and then she was like jumping out of the cinema and was like, I want to become a filmmaker, right? So Godard's film is the reason she wanted to be a filmmaker, and then she was a dropout from school, and then she somehow disappeared and found herself in New York for a year and was hanging out and finding out about a lot of these experimental films at the Anthology Film Archives, which she frequented.
Wow.
And was watching experimental cinema, very critical to this, to her trajectory, and also very critical to Jeanne Dielman. We'll get into that when we talk about it. I think it's important to see that Akerman is kind of an outcast of her own design. She's nonconformist. And if you want to know more about that, you should watch A Portrait of a Young Girl in the 60s in Brussels, which is very autobiographical, I think. So these are like the main kind of biographical details to know about Akerman. I'll just talk very briefly about her work. She's made 12 feature films, some of them for television, and Jeanne Dielman is her third feature film, and a bunch of short films. And these films are mostly about day-to-day living. Some of them are very experimental or mixtures of documentary, reflective films about herself. And a lot of them are also about women's sexuality, or they portray women's sexuality, whether through the act of sex or like through the act of discovering sexuality. I just want to throw this quote here that was from this documentary when she talks about time. And she talks about how people say that when you go to the cinema, when it's a good movie, you didn't feel it was 2 hours, right? The time flew by. And she loves American filmmakers like Hitchcock, who she says are really good at that, creating an entertaining thing. And she specifically does the opposite of them, because that she wants to make people feel the passing of time so that Chantal Akerman, don't take 2 hours from their lives, but they experience 2 hours. And she thinks that when they don't feel the time, meaning they don't feel the 2 hours, like in a Hitchcock film, it's like the 2 hours was taken from them. So she wants to actually give you 2 hours. She wants to make you feel 2 hours so you feel it more viscerally rather than make you escape. Like a lot of people think of film as escapism. If you think about people mindlessly scrolling through Netflix or TikTok, that's like wasting time. So she doesn't want to waste your time. She wants you to use your time.
I believe that filmmaking is about presence. It's about like being present as a person behind the camera, but also being present as a person that's watching the thing that's being projected in front of you. And not to go on too much of a tangent, but I've been thinking a lot about Fred Wiseman this week because I'm prepping for this workshop that I'm doing with a few kids. And I'm talking about observational documentary and how you can bring truth just by filming and documenting things. And your presence as a person in that room filming something happening is just this magical, moving thing. You were able to pass on empathy. And I think that's what Akerman just does so beautifully with the time that she has us be here with Jeanne Dielman.
She talks about how in documentary, that the moment you have a frame, there's an element of fiction in it. And she thinks the best fiction films have an element of documentary in them. And I think a lot of what she's doing is trying to blur the lines. And I think you can see in Jeanne Dielman, like what it's trying to do is kind of trying to give you a sense of real life, right? And that's not documentary, but it's trying to give you a sense of it. The last thing I want to talk about is that she obviously influenced many filmmakers like Gus Van Sant, but more importantly to us, deep cut filmmaker Kelly Reichardt was also very influenced by Akerman. I really liked her work. I think Meek's Cutoff of Reichardt's films feels the most like an Akerman film, the most about feeling time. And for Reichardt, it's using Akerman to remind herself that it's okay to let things move and have the rhythm of life just be part of the film. And the film is just the rhythm of life. It doesn't have to be maximum entertainment all the time. Cool. Summary of Jeanne Dielman, and we can launch into this. I stole this from some article, I forgot where. A minimalist epic chronicling the monotonous existence of cleaning, cooking, and tending to her son and sleeping with men for money of this woman, Jeanne Dielman. So it's more than 3 hours of Jeanne Dielman cooking, cleaning over the 3 days as we observe how her routine slowly changes and then finally ends and is completely disrupted by the end of the third day.
Yeah.
Before I got into the context, we talked about how radical the film is. Right?
Yeah.
Because it centers mundane housework, which is thought of as women's labor usually, over an epic 3.5 hour runtime, but also presented in a pretty radical cinematic style. And I think it's interesting how that intersects, because I have to remind myself that Jeanne Dielman was made before Jeanne Dielman existed as a film, as a reference. So then what is the reference for Akerman to make this at the age of 25? Like, why does she make something this radical at 25 and have the confidence to think that she could make a 3.5 hour movie that people would watch. Because that's a pretty wild thing to do. Like before this, she only had 2 feature films. One was a documentary and one was called Je tu il elle, which also I need to watch because it's pretty radical ending. So I think a lot about the way that Akerman structures her film narratively and what she wants to show you. Because for me, I always start with narrative structure. And I think Akerman is a person that's very interested in structure, also because she is quite inspired by structural films. And structural films are like these films where essentially you create some sort of rules or program to decide what is going to be in the film. Like you say, oh, I'm going to show you 10 scenes and each one is on the hour. That's a structure. And then you just do that. And then that's a structural film. So I think a lot of the films that she saw that were structural films were much more abstract. Like she has one that she really liked by this director, Michael Snow, which is a film that's 3 hours long, shot over 24 hours of an empty mountaintop where the camera has some kind of program to move around showing you the mountaintop over those 24 hours. And she's inspired by that kind of stuff and then kind of applying it to something that has a narrative, that has a meaning that she wants to express. And I think that's a pretty interesting confluence of her influence in terms of aesthetic influence, plus her personal messaging that she wants to like put out there.
I think it's really incredible because I feel like she borrows a lot of these qualities from experimental films. And I would even like classify Jeanne Dielman as an experimental film.
Definitely.
Right. Like I used it as an example when I was speaking to students about what an experimental film is. And it's, I think, just playing with setting up a pattern and starting to like slowly, very, very slowly setting up a pattern and starting to mess with that pattern. I remember a professor in college, I think it was probably Professor Dombrowski, was talking to us about stylistic patterns and directors using messaging when setting up a pattern and breaking it. I think what Akerman here does with the structure and with basically the plot of the film is that she sets up a narrative pattern that she slowly starts chipping away at. And then you, in time with Jeanne Dielman herself, feel the cracks starting to widen and ultimately fall apart. And I think just being able to be linked so closely with a character throughout the course of the film is something that I don't think a lot of other films are able to achieve with any characters that you see on screen. And that is due to being with her through all this monotonous movement and action through the first day. You won't be able to get through the thrills of watching her fuck up the potatoes without like slogging through that first day with her. Like it won't be as impactful. It's truly an amazing piece of filmmaking. It really, really is. And I would say that she's probably just a filmmaker that just doesn't watch other films that much, maybe. I know she was talking about Hitchcock, but I feel like she's very much the artist that is like, this is the art that I want to make. It's fully from me. I am not drawing from anyone else. And I'm just channeling myself into this movie. And that's why it still stands the test of time and is still so singular, even after influencing so many other filmmakers.
Or perhaps that she saw those movies and reverse engineered from the feeling of entertainment that they gave. Okay, if Hitchcock cuts on action in order to make a seamless edit that makes you forget time, then here I'm going to let Jeanne walk out of the room before I cut to the next angle.
It's interesting because she talks about how she does the opposite of these popular cinema filmmakers.
Yeah.
But something I think about a lot when I look at Jeanne Dielman and the way it looks. So dipping a little bit into like cinematography, which is like the way that she frames a scene is very architectural is what people say. She shows you the room and you're kind of one side of the wall, diametric, and she's just cutting into different rooms. But the thing that really made me think about a lot is the films from the 1910s.
Yeah.
films that are very interested in the contiguity of space.
Yes.
So
oh my God, yeah.
Not only is she doing continuity of time, she's also doing contiguity of space, because she's just like, here's a room, here's another room, and I'm not really gonna cut into the stuff. Just like, here's the room, and then she's in this room, now she's in that room, and you know the whole house. You never really see the layout, but you can kind of feel that she's moving between this house.
And
right?
you know where she's headed at a certain point,
Yeah.
too.
And you know the room from that one shot most of the time. And then for some rooms, there's like a second shot. And that second shot, when it comes in, usually is very special, like a special moment when the second shot comes in. The kitchen is like the most important room in the house in this film, I would say. And it has a second shot, which is a shot of her at the table. And that happens
The
a few
front on.
times. And it's maybe the closest shot that you get of Jeanne Dielman in the entire film. So I find it to be very interesting. Like, I'm not saying that she's referencing films from 1910s. I'm saying that she is thinking in that way. In that time, they really didn't think about the possibilities of editing. And it's almost like she created a few rules for herself in the way that she presents things, in a way that harkens back to how people thought in the 1910s about showing you something that's real and not kind of disrupting reality the way that editing can disrupt reality. So in that way, those cinematographic choices help you feel like what you're watching is a little bit more real than the regular movie.
I like that a lot, Ben.
Yeah. I find it really interesting also, the low camera also really reminded me of Ozu.
Ozu.
Oh, yeah. You
And
know?
with the planimetric staging as well. Like, I feel like she takes a lot from, well, I don't know if she's taking, but there's a lot of similarities there.
Mhm.
And just think about Ozu's films also being about the domestic. Like, maybe she didn't take reference from Ozu, but clearly that kind of story, the story of women in the house, makes you think of the boxes that they're in, and it pushes you towards the kind of shots that Akerman or Ozu is choosing for these contexts. So I find it to be just plenty fascinating that if we assume that they kind of developed in their own worlds, then you can kind of see the same seed but planted in different countries, resulting in similar kinds of expressions of film form.
I watched some of the behind the scenes documentary that you shared that's uploaded on the film stage of the filming of Jeanne Dielman. And I watched this sit-down interview that Delphine Seyrig does with someone behind the camera. And she talks about how so many movies about women, up to 1977, but I think still past 1977, are about women as either mothers or prostitutes. And Anora just won Best Picture, to my point here. But it made me think about Jeanne Dielman as in conversation with melodrama in the women's picture from like the 40s through the 60s especially, where I would classify this as a melodrama, but stylistically very, very different, of course. Those ones are going about establishing some of the same points about the constricting nature of domesticity and housework and living for the sake of husband and children. This one is using time and boredom as the tools to communicate those ideas, as opposed to sensationalism and extracting tears.
But isn't the melodrama like all about those big moments and those reveals and those reversals? And
I would argue that Jeanne Dielman is too. Those moments when we learn more about her backstory or something goes wrong in her routine, those land like big reversals. To say nothing of the finale of the movie.
The ending is a hugely melodramatic moment to see her murder a John. It is melodramatic. The only thing is that, unlike melodrama, which tends to give you psychological access to why people do crazy things, we don't fully understand why Jeanne Dielman does what she does.
I found myself thinking of Mona Lisa. If it implies a rich inner life with simply a smile, here you find yourself thinking about what's going on in her head.
That behind the scenes is so interesting. I watched the whole thing because most of it is actually just how Akerman directs Seyrig, and you feel the tension so strongly between them. And it's so interesting.
They're like arguing.
At this time, Seyrig is 43 years old and Akerman is 25. It's making her third feature, and she's trying to tell people to make this experimental feature. Seyrig has a career making commercial cinema, and she is an actress that knows her craft. And she's asking, what is the psychological thing happening with me as a character? What's happening? And Akerman just does not tell her. Akerman just doesn't, because she's like, I need you to just do this stuff. Just go there, spend 15 seconds on the balcony, come out. And she never answers Seyrig's questions. And you feel Seyrig getting really annoyed. But I think, to her credit, very respectful of what Akerman is doing.
Yeah.
Wants to help her, but thinks that she knows better than Akerman because she clearly has more experience. And so it's like, you need to give me more so I can like create the internal life of the character. That's basically what she's asking. And Akerman's giving her nothing. You know, Ackerman's like, I don't know, just do the things. And
oh my gosh, I feel like I'm understanding her so much more as a director in the last 45 minutes.
She's a fucking OG. Like the fact that at 25 she talks to a 40 plus year old seasoned actress and is like, just do what I want. And you can tell that, I would say that my reading of these conversations is that Ackerman's just placating her. She just wants Seyrig, because of how Seyrig looks, to be the character, but she's just placating Seyrig so that Seyrig will just do the stuff, you know, and to fit into her meaning, which is to give you this mundane slice of life of a woman who also is a mother and also a prostitute. That's what she wants to do. And I think that's fascinating because it shows you the singularity of her vision when she comes into this, that she knows exactly what she wanted already, even before stepping onto set. You can tell.
Withholding psychology from Delphine Seyrig also works on a kind of meta level. I'm thinking of those moments when Jeanne does not have something to do actively and she can't think of anything to do other than just sit there and stare.
Yeah.
Like she doesn't know herself well enough to know, she hasn't been allowed to know herself well enough to know what she would do with free time. So it makes sense that the actress would not have a clear grasp on this character either. She doesn't have a grasp on herself.
I think it is to the benefit of the film that Seyrig was asking so many questions because you feel the simmer under her eyes, and that's what's going on. That's what's really interesting to watch. You're like, what is happening with this woman? And what's happening is that Seyrig's like, I don't know what the fuck is happening. She's trying to make it up, and she just doesn't have the guardrails to make up the thing. So she's just like, I'll just cook the thing. I'll just prepare the thing. And so they're like having conversations about how many blankets on the bed, what makes sense, how many blankets, what kind of woman is she, how many blankets. Like they're asking very simple things. When they prepare the veal, they're like, this is the wrong tabletop. Is that a right tabletop? And like very logistical questions about what a woman would do and what this character would do rather than what her feelings are.
But isn't that what's on her mind? That's what is concerning her. And also to that point, I see way too many movies where people are like, cooking, and I'm saying cooking with quotation marks, or cleaning with quotation marks, where it just does not look real. And it's a thing. It's an important thing to like get the authenticity of a mundane task, or else it will take you out of the film. And very first and prime example of that is this. Everything feels authentically done in this movie because you spend the time and they spend the effort to make it real.
The movie doesn't tell you that she's done these chores thousands of times, but because it looks real, you know that she's an expert in these things and has done them thousands of times.
The rehearsals help them figure out like, where is the home for like the pot? Where does she put things? What is her routine? And they try and set that just that when Seyrig does it for real on camera, she knows exactly where everything is. And so it feels like she has done it thousands of times. And the fact that that is the most important part of the filmmaking process shows you what the film cares about. The film cares about rituals. It cares about these kind of domestic rituals and what they do. And I kind of want to talk about time. And I find it very fascinating because, of course, watching her do cooking, preparing veal in real time, she does every single step in one shot. It's real time. There's this sense that the film is trying to present you real time. But of course, it is still only 3.5 hours of a 72-hour period. So it is cut down. And I think the big omission we know, the ellipses, is that we never see her interactions in the bedroom with her clients until the very end. That's very clear ellipses, but there are some really interesting cuts in this that cut time out that somehow don't disrupt that feeling of real time. There is a cut in, I think, day 2. This is when she fucks up the potatoes. And she serves finally the meal to her son. And the camera cuts from one angle of the table where the son's on the left, and then she's in the middle of the frame. And it cuts to the son is in the middle of the frame, behind him is the living room, and then she's on the right of the frame. When it cuts, food disappears, he's done doing his homework, and he's about to go to bed.
Yes.
Fascinating jump cut, but not really a jump cut either. A very French kind of thing, but a cut that works in terms of like contiguity of space. You feel like you're in the same place. You feel like you didn't skip time when you've just skipped maybe like an hour. And that somehow doesn't break the feeling that you are going through the whole day with her, even though you're not really going through the whole day with her. I think it's interesting how keeping the contiguity of space also kind of keeps the continuity of time.
That's how much mastery she has over the craft as well, that she can choose when she wants a cut to draw attention to itself and when it will act sort of invisibly and subtly move you through time. And even that is not really a cheat because you know the routine at that point. It's the end of day 2. You know what to expect. And somehow skipping time there still highlights the boredom and mundanity of it. Like, same stuff happened again as last night. You already know it. By jumping ahead in time, you're not really missing anything because you know what has happened. And it makes you think that little separation from Jeanne's real-time experience kind of made me reflect on, okay, as bored as I am, parentheses complimentary, I'm still experiencing things more efficiently than Jeanne did for the last hour or so of her life.
We don't fully experience her like boredom or whatever it is, her detachment or whatever it is she's feeling in her head that we can only really guess at. We are only getting a fraction of her frustration, really.
And it's a massive fraction. I mean, it's like a small fraction of her frustration, but it still feels so frustrating.
Maybe let's just like clarify the pattern we're talking about in terms of the film's narrative structure. The first day begins with her cooking, I guess, at the start, or preparing something in the kitchen before meeting her first customer on day 1, her one customer for day 1. And then there's an exchange of money. They go into a room. We skip whatever happens in the bedroom, and time passes. It becomes dark. And then she does her entire routine after sleeping with the client and then continues making dinner and then meets her son. They have dinner, go to bed, and then they go to sleep. And that's basically the end of day 1. She doesn't leave the house in the first day because we're already beginning in the mid-afternoon. And then day 2, we actually see the whole day. Day 2 is the only day that we see the whole day, where we see more of a morning routine and then her going out to do some errands. I think she goes to some kind of bank. I'm not very sure.
Or a mail office?
I don't really know.
Office?
Yeah. She goes off and like sends the shoes to be repaired. She buys, I think, the veal. And then she returns home and then she continues doing the prep. And then it kind of becomes more similar to day 1. But day 2 is the day that she fucks up the potatoes, which is a very critical thing. And so mainly when we talk about the pattern disruption is that in seeing how her routine is in the first day, you see how her routine is disrupted when the way that she makes dinner becomes disrupted in day 2. And then again, how things fall further out of whack in day 3 with disruptions that aren't necessarily bad things. Like, I realized watching it a little bit today that the main reason that the ending happens is because she opens the package in her room and leaves the pair of scissors in her bedroom.
Oh.
And that is maybe the biggest reason why she kills the man is because she opened the package in her room with a pair of scissors, which is a huge change in routine that is very mundane, but then somehow affects her or becomes a signal to her psychologically to commit this act. So in watching the film, essentially you're building the routine of Jeanne Dielman and then seeing how it changes. Even in day 3, we watch her collecting the shoes, going back to the same shop that's now closed, the mail place, I don't know, and see how it kind of throws her off balance.
The edit starts to change at that point too, because whereas she'll mostly leave a room and the shot will linger before cutting to the next space, on the third day, it's cutting to the next space before her, almost like it's anticipating
Nice catch.
or directing her where to go.
Like the potatoes, when she fucks them up, is one of the areas where like you start cutting to see her coming through the door from the kitchen, rather than that shot that always has the stove in the background, or the shot where the balcony is in the background. But then it's very rare to have that shot from the balcony towards the doorway to the kitchen, which is when she has the potatoes. Because what happens is that she overcooks the potatoes, and she's like, oh crap, I overcooked the potatoes. She picks them out, and then for some reason goes to the bathroom with them.
She's like carrying them through the house.
Because it's a hot pot, she didn't want to put it down on the table and mark the wood. So then she takes it to the bathroom, try to put that's what I assume.
In my head, I was just like, she just is kind of lost her mind a little bit. Because sometimes I walk into rooms and I forget what I'm doing. I do that all the time.
I was getting that as well. I was like, there's some sort of rewiring that's happening because all she's relying on is this routine and everything going to plan. And when things start deviating from the plan, then she's just sort of like losing this sense of self slowly. Yeah. And it's just a manifestation of that. But I was like thinking about what triggers this. What triggers things starting
unraveling
to go wrong? Yeah. What do you guys think triggers it? Because most of the things that happen, I guess, after she meets with her client on day 2. And then
like things go wrong after that meeting.
And then day 3 after another meeting is sort of what accelerates us to the end of the film. So I guess this sex works that she's doing, what is Akerman trying to like relay to us about that?
I think it goes back to what Eli says about the Mona Lisa, and I think you just don't know. And I think that's why the film has held in the kind of critical imagination, is because you don't know. And you have to fill in the blanks. And it's not an interpretation thing. She's giving you nothing. Very little, really. Like you can guess. And I think she wants you to see it in Seyrig's eyes. And even Seyrig herself maybe doesn't know what is happening. But somehow maybe the seeing of how the routine disrupts tells you that something went off. Although I've heard some like really interesting theories, which I forget where I read them, which is that there is this idea that maybe because she comes out of that second meeting with her hair really disheveled, and then she like forgets, I think she cleans the bathroom before she checks on the potatoes, and that's what she kind of screws up the order of things. And so the potatoes get overcooked. One theory is that she receives like surprising sexual pleasure in that meeting, and it confuses her, which is an interesting reading, but it's not necessarily something that I see in the film, but not necessarily something that I can discount either. Because you can also do the opposite, which is that maybe this client was violent towards her, right? That's also very plausible. But the fact that both theories can work means that the film is extremely open-ended in you thinking about what's happening in the bedroom. And I would even argue that when we are in the bedroom in day 3, it is completely ambiguous what she's feeling when the man is on top of her. Because some people have read it to be expressions of pleasure, but also it also just looks like resisting to me. Like we're not sure whether she just like dislikes him or she dislikes what she's doing or both. Or maybe that she is having, some people say, an orgasm in that scene. Like, I don't know. And I think you can kind of read it either way. And so it is a very interesting Mona Lisa thing happening. And I think it comes down to Seyrig not really knowing herself.
Yeah. I am reading an interview on Slant magazine that was conducted 30 years after the film came out. And he asks her, do you know what happens to Jen with her second client on the second day? With her second client, she had an orgasm. That was what destroyed her order. There was no room for that in her life.
So that's maybe where I read it from. I mean, it's one theory, and I'm also going to say that you don't have to take even Akerman's word for it.
Exactly.
I agree.
Exactly.
To understand the film. But if we were to take that, then it is an interesting reading where it is kind of surprising to think about it in that way, because she's also trying to put in this meaning that she's complicating sex work, which I think is interesting.
So at the start of the movie, we almost immediately get the first encounter with the first male caller.
Yeah.
Right after, she puts the money into a porcelain dish on the table, which, thanks to my dad, I know is a soup tureen.
Okay.
So, soup tureen. She puts the money in the soup tureen. First thing that she serves her son,
Soup.
say it with me, soup.
Okay. Where are we going with this?
So that's the first, but not nearly the only indication that all the work she does is in service of her son.
Mm-hmm.
To the extent that she folds his pajamas for him and puts his bed away, the folding bed that he sleeps in. Things that he could very easily take care of himself. I am currently teaching Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. And a key part of that book is about how the ways in which expectations of mothers to make themselves small in the service of their sons is something that harms both the mother and the son. So to me, those nighttime conversations on day 1 and day 2 with her son are the skeleton key to unlock it.
Okay.
Because my thought at those conversations is he's like 15, 16, 17, something. And yet he's never heard the story of how his mom met his dad. And he's never divulged this thing about his anxiety around sex and faking nightmares to prevent his mother and father from having sex and feeling like his father's death was punishment for how he had sex with his mother. These things ostensibly in the name of protecting his mother, but really are selfish, self-centering actions of a child. To me, if Jeanne's entire routine, her reason for existence, for every action she does, is to put money in that soup tureen and give her son metaphorical and literal soup, to realize that her son may have the wrong idea of her, of who she is, of how to be a person in the world, that everything she's been doing has led to a misunderstanding, has been pointless, and has been raising a little bit of a creep, that would be pretty shattering to me, to realize that everything you've done, that one goal that you've had has been mistaken. That to me is the quietly earth-shattering thing. And Akerman, to her credit, really hides that. Because during those conversations, the camera is closer to the son. And I think even the focus is on the son. Whereas Jeanne is in the deep background at the entrance to that living room, dining room area. And we don't get to see really how she reacts to that kind of creepy conversation.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, if she says that she's made every movie about her mom, right? Could we see her, Akerman herself, in the son? I think when I was watching this, I've watched like so many Asian American films about this like idea of like filial piety, or like just being a good son to your parents. And I think no movie has matched the amount of guilt that I like feel being a bad son as Jeanne Dielman. Like I think like walking away from that movie and being like, oh my God. But I feel like it like brought up a lot of things that I like was not thinking about before. I realized this mother-son relationship is the most crucial. Well, it's the only relationship we basically see like over the few days. But it's so impactful while at the same time like delivering basically nothing. There's nothing there, but in that nothingness comes with a lot of questions and a lot of like self-doubt. And if Akerman is writing this movie and she's including these two characters and this sort of strained relationship or this misunderstanding or this power dynamic is messing it up. Like, I think it's, I don't know. It's wild. This movie's wild.
it makes you ask, have I lived up to and shown enough gratitude for and done work for the mother who has done that work for me? Also worth mentioning that Akerman's sister's name is Sylviane.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Yeah, sorry, Ben, I'm stealing your thunder. Go.
No, like Akerman's actual sister is named Sylvain, which is like a feminine version of the name of the son, whose name is Sylvain as well. So I think Akerman isn't the son. I think she's the camera, because she talks about how she watched families bring each other up when she was a child, and she was observing a lot of things. And I would say that Dielman maybe is obviously not her mother, but it's an amalgamation of women's experiences that she observed as a child, as a teenager, that she's putting into the film.
A crisis of motherhood.
And she says this offhand in, I think, the behind the scenes, that the prostitution's kind of a metaphor, but she doesn't say for what, right? Because it's a bit too maybe on the nose to say, oh, it's also a metaphor for the housework itself, because she's also doing that. She's doing the housework and the prostitution. So if the prostitution is a metaphor for something outside the movie, then what is it? Like, what is she servicing? And if we assume that because the husband is out of the picture or the father is out of the picture, then is the prostitution servicing other people? Is that necessarily about men, or is it about something else? And like, if I want to throw in a theory, I think there's a possibility also thinking about the time that she spends doing nothing. Akerman talks about how in day 2, she wakes up 1 hour early and then she ends up having 1 hour to burn. And she doesn't know what to do with it. And I think there is an interesting question of whether Jeanne Dielman even knows who she is.
Yeah, that's what I mean when I say that
Yeah.
I don't think she does.
And so like then she's also lacking a sense of self. And like you were saying, like if all she does is raise a person and then the person is kind of whatever, then her life is also meaningless. But I think that's interesting because it also kind of throws this other thing into the conversation, which is that a very surface level reading of the film is talking about how we're not grateful for women's labor of cleaning and domestic labor and all that stuff, and that we should appreciate it more, or that recognize it as labor and all that. There is a reading of this, which is kind of related to something that Akerman says in some of the interviews that I read, which is that the domestic rituals are for her actually an extension of Jewish rituals that her family used to do. Like her father used to do Jewish rituals. And then once they moved and they emigrated, they stopped doing all that. And the domestic rituals are kind of a replacement of the Jewish rituals. And so the domestic rituals bring a sort of peace. They are like rituals that make you feel good. And so even though it's labor, it's domestic work, it also feels good to her. And that's why when the rituals themselves get fucked, it also disrupts her because they are what keeps her tethered to the ground, right? So even the prostitution is also kind of good for her. It's a ritual. Work, labor is ritual. Labor is, in a way, grounds you, but doesn't mean it's good, but it grounds you. It has some positive aspects, right? And I think that makes the film much more interesting, that it also contradicts itself, or that it presents two sides to every coin every time. That, oh, let's venerate the mother's work, but also the mother's work is alienating, but also the mother's work makes the mother not want to commit murder and kill herself. So a lot of things are going on at once. And if we think back to the Jewishness, like, and of course, Akerman is a Jew, maybe there's kind of a commentary about how as they moved away from religion, they lost some sense of grounding, and then they needed to replace it with something. And that's something they replace it with, whether it's domestic work or whether it's labor or whether it's prostitution. Like, there is this human desire to create that kind of structure that maybe with the lack of religion in this household for Jeanne Dielman was this domestic labor and prostitution work. Yeah, I don't know. It's like fascinating to just think about.
That is, yeah.
I like how this movie can exist as so many different things and saying so many like different things, like even contradictory things, and still exist as a piece of filmmaking. Yeah, I think the more that we talk about it, the more I feel like it continues to justify itself as being like, there's so many reasons, like you've mentioned, like let's put a female directed film, or these critics are all coming up with these different categories to sort of classify this film in order for it to become the greatest film of all time. But I think there's just so many things that make this so singular and so unique of an experience within just the whole canon of cinema itself that solidifies this film in the canon. near the top of the canon because of how well it's executed, but also of what it's trying to say, the many different things that it's trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as we're talking, I'm seeing more ambivalence in it than I gave credit for at the top. I still am curious about the timing and sort of what it does as a statement on film that film critics in 2022 choose this as the number one film.
Do you think that it's not reflective of the times that we currently live in now still? Or do you think it's very much of that time? Because I feel like there's so many links to living today.
There's an article by Angelica Jade Bastien on her Substack, Mad Women and Muses, about long legs. Permit me a digression.
Go ahead.
It's all about how horror's current obsession with religion and religious horror, nun horror, possession horror, conjuring, etc., is failing to engage with the real, actual current problems facing, in her essay, she says, America as a nation. I'm just interested that in 2022, the movie that's being chosen as representative of cinema as an art form and our moment socially right now is tackling issues in 1977. Now, you could say the same thing for A Citizen Kane. And in both those movies, especially now at the end of our conversation, I'm seeing more of how they still extend to right now.
I would say that actually, this being, I guess in a sense, democratically chosen by a bunch of critics to be the top film, which once again is a very arbitrary kind of accolade as well. Like,
Right.
More people decided to put this high up on the list than others. It's actually not reflective of the time. It is actually aspirational rather than looking back or looking today. Because it is a protest against the shrinking attention economy, the current strongman culture, and centering women's issues. So I think it's aspirational rather than reflective of the times. And of course, being aspirational is also reflective of the times. History is reflective of the present, and the future that we want is reflective of the current present that we live in. So I think that's what it really is. That when I overweight Jeanne Dielman, whether I like it more than another film or not, I overweight it because I'm saying, man, fuck Citizen Kane. I'm sick of that shit.
Yeah.
I don't want that in my life right now because that story is happening in our lives right now. The Citizen Kane story is happening. I'm like, I don't want that to be the thing again. Or the Vertigo story, which is about a man being freaking Delulu, you know what I mean? So, I mean, obviously everything's freaking political. So definitely it is a political act to push Jeanne Dielman to the top. And it makes a lot of sense, I think, in our current climate of 2022 and even now in 2025, for sure.
Yeah, you know what? That really kind of helps me understand it more. Yeah, I totally agree. And it is well chosen to that end.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think so too. Like, you think about it in relation to any of the other women's films, like that are in the top 100 or like the other female directed films in the top 100. It ticks more boxes, I would say, than the others.
Yes.
You know?
Duration, mundanity, really being opposite of strongman. Yeah.
But it still wouldn't be there without the overall impact of the film, which I think is kind of undeniable. Agreed. It's a tsunami. It's a tsunami of film.
Yeah, the film is well made. You can see even at 25, Akerman is very clear about the craft. Like, she knows what she's doing. She knows why she's doing what she's doing. She knows she's not doing something normal, but she still knows it works, which is crazy. You know? And I think that is the feat of experimentation. It's really hard to kind of remember, which is what I said when I said Jeanne Dielman didn't exist when Jeanne Dielman was being made. How could she know this was going to work unless she just had that level of conviction in what she was doing? What was her frame of reference besides this weird mountain film that had nobody in it? That's like a David Lynch kind of leap.
I don't think we've covered a director like this ever on the podcast before.
We just made something up.
Like, no, it's just someone who is so like very, very much sure of themselves and what they want and won't compromise or won't take another road. It's just her road or bust. And
She's a G.
she is a G. And like who else is a G? I guess maybe Wong Kar-wai is a G. That's why his movies are up there.
Yeah.
But maybe it just takes this idea that we all share, that critics have, that filmmaking is very much a director's vision, and how close you stray to that vision, and if it delivers, then reward it.
I am very wary of always thinking that sometimes. Some credit can be given to the interesting tensions on the set based on that behind the scenes that she navigates very well as a young filmmaker, I would say, but also I think invigorates the film in a certain way. And
that she didn't foresee, probably.
Yeah, and I would say that also something interesting is that she made sure that her crew was mostly female. Like it was an 80% women's crew. And like, even if she doesn't maybe outrightly identify as feminist, like that's a feminist act to be like, okay, I want to make sure there's women on my crew to make this film about women. That's something that you hear people doing in 2010s and it being very novel, but she was doing that shit in 1975.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So she's always been kind of at the forefront of that. And like her early films are about queer sexuality, which is also very rare for the time. She's always been pretty trailblazing in the pursuit of pushing women's narratives and also queer narratives. And I find it to be very fascinating that we don't really hear about it in that way for some reason. I don't know why. And I think it did take it being at the top of Sight and Sound for it to kind of come to me in this way, that I would not have maybe prioritized looking at Jeanne Dielman if not for that. So there is a lot of value in that top 100, as much as I hate the idea of a ranking, you know?
One of my favorite reviews on Letterboxd that I read of Jeanne Dielman is by a user named Stephen Gillespie from the UK. And he cites Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own. And he cites the idea that Jeanne Dielman, as Woolf argues, both occupies its own kind of echelon and its own space as a female and or queer film, and occupies space within the overall cinema canon. To hold both those things, even when Akerman does not want to identify, as you're saying, Ben, as just a female filmmaker or just a queer filmmaker, there's something necessary about holding both.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some... Oh, sorry.
Scenes? Yeah, I was going to say that.
Yeah.
Should we talk about some scenes?
Let's talk about some sequences and some scenes. I'm happy to do that.
As someone who doesn't drink coffee, this movie taught me how to make coffee.
The coffee scene is my favorite scene. For some reason.
What was wrong with the coffee, do you think?
I don't know. I think maybe it just tastes bad. And she's just trying to figure out how to make it taste better. I have seen people describe her as somebody maybe with OCD.
I thought that too.
Possible.
Crossed my mind.
Yeah, I don't think it was a baby.
I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't know. I don't know whether that's necessarily true. I would say that it doesn't come off as obsessive enough, maybe, or compulsive enough. I don't know. It's hard to say. But there is something about that coffee sequence that I, for some reason, find very interesting to look at. And I think it comes down to the process of it and the fact that she tries so many things to make it taste different. But also, I think it kind of goes back to this, like, she's kind of wasting time. Like, she doesn't want to do with herself. So she's making coffee take just a horrible amount of time for some reason.
Yeah.
You know, like, she tries the milk, doesn't work. She gets the sugar, doesn't work. She throws the whole thing out. I think she gets another pot going. Like, I don't know what she's doing, but that's the scene where I was like, something is really off right now. Like,
it's excruciating.
Something is going on in her head. I do not know, but she is losing her mind. And I would say that I didn't know the ending going in, which was good. So it wasn't like a shock or anything, but I was like, yeah, clearly something's off right now. And it kind of made a lot of sense. Like the flow of her descent or like her slow progression towards murder makes a lot of sense in the context of the whole movie. Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, I can see her slowly losing it.
I feel like it's very, very, very different film, but you have a similar trajectory in A Brighter Summer Day, right? Which, you're trying to explain this violent act that Xiao Shi does at the end of the film. Like similarly here, you're sort of tracking this character and you're understanding, or you're getting close to understanding why they do what they do without fully understanding. You get an inkling. It's not out of the question, even though it's so unthinkable in daily life. Like once you see it, once you follow this person, you're like, okay, I see it.
I knew that the movie was going to end with a violent act. And I think someone had even told me that she kills the person who solicits her services. But I didn't remember that for certain. And there were points when I was wondering, oh, is she going to wind up killing her son? Or when she's taking care of the baby.
Oh,
I was worried about that baby. I was really worried about that baby.
God damn, that fucking baby.
That scene is brutal, where she's picking up the baby again and again to try to play with it, and it starts crying. That's like, bummer.
I did
Bummer.
wonder, as I was watching it, whether we would ever be in that bedroom when she is with the men. Like, when she skipped it the first 2 times, I was like, oh, is this just the formal choice she's going with to never show it? But of course, when she does show it, you're like, oh my God, something is going to happen because I'm in the room now. After 3 hours, I'm in the room now. Why am I here?
Iron breaks really make your hair at the back of your neck
Like
stand
it
on end.
perks your ears up. Yeah. You're
She
like,
dropped a
whoa.
fork.
And I think going through it again a little bit today, I was like, yeah, then you start to see where all the little bits lead to that, like with the scissors, getting the package. Like very mundane, but does lead her to the act in the end.
Everything is still essential. Like you're thinking about, you're like talking about filmmakers that are like, oh, every scene in this film is consequential. And maybe from looking at it from an objective point of view, maybe it is not consequential, but I think everything deserves its place in the sequencing of events in this film, which lead into the variations and just the breaking down of everything.
I mean, everything has a function. I think that's like the big thing. You might be like, did that scene need to be that long? But it had a function. And the length of the scene also has a function. And when I was doing research, I found this YouTube video, which I'm not going to name, where the guy was shitting on the film because he was like 20-minute short film idea, stretched out to 3.5 hours, worst best film of all time. And I was like, what are you talking about, dude? What are you talking about? Of course, this man. I was like, what?
Missing the point.
I was like, this is the whole point. Like I don't know why you think you're a film analysis channel when you cannot analyze this film, which is very obvious of what it's doing. Formally, very easy to dissect, I would say. It is very obvious what it's doing. I was just like, what? Anyway, rant over.
You, as a viewer, you come to rely on the rituals in a way that is analogous to how Jeanne relies on them for a sense of self. Those rituals define your experience as a viewer.
And I think, what do you think of the exterior scenes? Because I find the exterior scenes to be interesting, but I'm trying to place them because they're such big breaks from the domesticity of the house. For example, the patterning of her going to that mailroom or whatever. The first time it's open, the second time it's closed. But functionally speaking, I don't know what it does. And these are the ones that I'm like curious about when she buys the vehicle. Obviously, also fits within the theme of just showing you everything that she does, like going shopping and stuff like that. Although there's this this idea that when she goes shopping, she's looking for something to do because she has like some spare time. So she just leaves the house for a while, trying to while away the hours. But I did find it interesting, like having these errands to be part of the structure because the errands have less repetition in a sense because like you only go to fix your shoes once every few months at most. So we are seeing a very busy time for Jeanne Dielman in her routine. She's like doing a lot of stuff, like going shopping, trying to fix the buttons. These are somewhat one-off things that you would do. They are less routine.
Insofar as going out and running errands in general could be part of her routine, even though it does involve going to the same cafe, it seems, every day. Ostensibly leisure, but so planned out that it's boring. Like when someone takes her table.
Yeah, that's like the one thing that changes, right? Every time she goes back to something, she changes something. I remember my screening, I was with my friend and she was like, oh, she forgot the shoes. And I was like, oh my gosh, she forgot the shoes. I forgot about the shoes myself. But then I was watching again today. I was like, oh, no, she didn't forget the shoes. We just weren't in the shoe shop with her the third day.
Yeah, she gets the
she
shoes.
does get the shoes. But it's funny because my friend was thinking about the shoes. She was worried about the shoes. Like, she didn't see that she got it, but she was worried about it because she was thinking about the routine, and then she was like kind of stuck in it too. She's like, John, get the shoes.
The trip outdoors that I'm still not entirely positive I understand is the nighttime walks.
The
with
night
her son.
one.
It's interesting that those shots are filmed in such overbearing underexposure that you can't even see her son or her for most of them.
It's sort of like a elided moment, even though we are witness to a part of it. Like, I think there's like a part of that relationship that maybe we're not privy to, that maybe is maybe a little more loving or intimate or more family-like than what we see in the domestic space.
Well, I don't know about that.
I don't know. But it could be anything, right? Like, it really could. It could be anything.
Yeah, I mean, similarly to the cafe, it's like any leisurely moment is planned out to the point that it is dull. The walk, the cafe, sit down. Early in the second day, she runs into someone who knows her, who invites her over for coffee, and she says, I can't be there today, maybe sometime next week. And you're clearly like, she's not going to go get coffee with this woman. Even before she murders someone, she's not going to go get coffee with this woman.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of self-denial of interaction or pleasure that seems to be integral to how she conducts herself. It would be nice if the boy would volunteer and help his mom. She should also tell him.
I think it goes back to the fact that housework is both a burden and a crutch. That she leans on it to give her life shape. And she uses it as an excuse to not deal with the fact that her life is empty. That is just, to me, core contradiction of the film that it wants to show you. Like, she likes this in a weird way, maybe, because it helps her deal with maybe the just existential dread of being alive. And that's got actually less to do with women's issues and more to do with like human philosophical existential needs.
Yeah.
You know, like, what do you do with yourself? And I think when you hear Akerman talk, you can tell that that's like what she's really interested in. Like, what do you do with your life? Like, and I think maybe also drawing from like observing people who have survived the Holocaust and being like still shell-shocked from that, trying to find themselves years after, right? That probably is related a little bit to what's going on here. Like, maybe the metaphor is also maybe about that.
I think it is. I think that's totally within bounds. Worth noting that Jeanne is without any member of her family other than her son. Her husband died 6 years ago. Her sister lives in Canada. Her parents were killed, presumably in the war, potentially in the Holocaust. She grew up in the company of aunts who she doesn't seem to still be in touch with. So, yeah, there's really only her routine as a structuring device in her life.
Eli, you mentioned Seyrig's like little interview in that behind the scenes.
Yeah.
A little talking here. And she talks a little bit about this, where she's like really happy to work on the film because she talks about how up until that point in the making of the film, in that year, that for a lot of women, what they only could aspire to be was to be mothers. And that for men have more choices, right? Their lives might not necessarily be better, but still difficult maybe even in that time. But what they had over women was choice. And so for this character, for Dielman, then she has already done the thing, which is to be a mother. But maybe that's not enough. There are other choices, but she actually doesn't know what those choices are. And that maybe sends her into the spiral. It's a very rich text to mine. Yeah. And especially in relation to all, like, just like the larger cinema context, right? The way that it is in opposition to the way that you would make a regular film.
The other thing, too, if it's in conversation with the predominant style of cinema, it's also in conversation with your own cultural knowledge of modernity and domesticity and the 20th century aftermath of World War II. If you didn't have those frames of reference, which any movie you need, you have some cultural frame of reference. But if you didn't have that, this movie would be meaningless. It really engages you on how you live your life day to day in the context of domestic labor.
Yeah, that's very universal as well,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think you don't really need to place it in a post-World War II Western country for it to make sense that what she's doing for her son or her family and how women are treated in the household. That's like a very global feeling. And I think that's why also it resonated with so many international critics as well.
Yeah. Like an Asian standpoint, like what you're seeing is a very family-oriented or like duty to family kind of scene here, worldview that we're seeing here, like sacrifice myself for my family kind of thing. And maybe that's a very Eastern European thing because of the wake of the war, that we need to like help each other. And then obviously from Asian countries like Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, whatever, it's like very collective. It's very like duty to family. So it resonates. It's very easy to see what the mother is doing or sacrificing and why she would sacrifice it. And also how it helps her, but also hobbles them. The kind of like the good and the bad of it, the lack of choice. So it's very obvious. I do wonder about it in the relation of a more individualist society like America, more Western countries, which care more about individual agency and that are maybe more advanced in thinking of women as being less attached to the duty to family kind of like worldview, where maybe it's slightly less relevant to the same audience of our generation now around the world, because it feels a bit more maybe removed compared to an Asian perspective. I'm like, yeah, sure, this still tracks for me now. Like this still tracks now.
Wilson, in your Letterboxd review, which I did read before watching, you describe those last three shots, which are sex with the John, killing the John, and sitting at the table covered in blood, as that billboard outside her window flashes light, as it has through the whole movie, into her living room. You describe those three shots as build-up, pain, release.
It's a trigger and then it's action and release. Like, I think within those three shots in itself is there's a contained story in that. And just in those final moments, the weight of what you had seen before sort of comes hurtling towards you as a viewer. And then it's sort of like shot chaser. Like it's like that kind of moment, but elongated over like 10 minutes or 15 minutes or however many long minutes it takes for us to get through those three shots. But I think just the sequencing of these very simple shots and things happening in these shots and settling into that nothingness or that release or that relax after the weight is off of her shoulders after she commits this act. And I like feel that from her. I feel that watching her at the end.
I don't feel the weight off at all. I feel a feeling of like, well, what now? Like, where is her son? He's not come home for dinner.
Oh.
She has a body lying on her bed. She told her son to come home for a snack, and he didn't in the middle of the day. And she's covered in blood. And that light is continuing to flash annoyingly into her room from outside her window. So I feel a despondent, depleted resignation at the end rather than, I've released all this tension. For me, it's like, what now?
Interesting. Really, really interesting. I like see it differently. I think she is so frustrated that she needs to like tear this whole ritual system down by the end of it. And she does it, or she escapes, or she has to do something. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's not.
So maybe for
freedom,
Wilson,
or at
it's
least
kind of melodramatic catharsis because it's the sensational act, right? The most sensational part of the whole film is that last sequence. I definitely feel like almost anticlimactic about it. I just watched her murder somebody. I'm like, oh, that tracks. but also kind of like, so what in a way that's like not dismissive. It's like, oh, okay, now what? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, this is it. And in a way, it's kind of a film that builds up to those 3 shots to justify the 3 shots. And I would say that the film becomes more subjective. Not subjective, but more subjective as it reaches its coda, because you were talking about a reflection in the elevator shot, like something a bit more, expressive, where she's in the middle of the frame and she's in that slit of a mirror leaning.
Yeah.
Something about it, you feel something's off. But then even before that, there's this shot that I'm like, bruh, where she's sitting on the couch, on the armchair.
Oh, yeah.
It's a full 5 minutes of her sitting on the couch. It cuts to a frontal shot of her sitting on the couch or the armchair rather than that long shot that it usually uses of the entire room. Very, very much disrupting the pattern that you usually get in the film. And all she does is sit there. All she does
you
is
think
sit
you're
there.
about to get more access because it's a medium close-up, it's frontal, and no, you don't get more.
You just are there with her. And the only thing you might be able to understand is that she's also bored. Like you. And like looking for something to do. And maybe that thing is kill a man today.
You know what I found myself thinking of in the final shot? Have both of you seen Beau Travail?
Yes.
Claire Denis?
Yes.
I have not seen Beau Travail.
Okay, I'm not going to spoil it then, but Ben, you know what I'm talking about in the last shot of that movie.
I guess so.
Is it a dancing sequence?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is by far the most expressive and almost impressionistic shot of that movie.
I don't know. I would say Beau Travail is, on the whole, very expressive. Like a dance film, So it doesn't feel too much different.
But it is a departure.
It is a departure.
Like,
I think
formally.
because of the music and the location.
Do you think that this final shot in Jeanne Dielman is a departure or like a break stylistically from the rest of the film?
Not
I think it's very
hugely
much
so.
Yeah.
Not in terms of editing, but I do feel that it's doing something a little bit more impressionistic. Even though it's at the same angle we've seen it from before, it's the same extended take that we've become accustomed to. The color red, that she's no longer matching the wallpaper of her house in that teal robe or overcoat, that it's frontal, but her expression is only kind of fleetingly visible. And it recontextualizes that flashing light from outside her window. Yeah. There's something I can't quite put my finger on about that last shot that feels dreamy.
There's like a lyricism to it that's different. It is the same, different. But different.
That's like the crucial way to describe this film. The same, but different.
Theme and variation.
Yeah.
But here, if we're talking about her murder as an act that disrupts the routine, or perhaps as a way of breaking out of it, I feel that now what? Because it's the same space, characterized in a totally different novel way. And that is perhaps the tragedy of the murder, is that everything and nothing has changed in that act.
Like she's just as detached and distant despite committing a murder.
Yeah, she still doesn't know what to do when she's just sitting there.
Like in a way, the murder doesn't even faze her. It doesn't even give her anything.
No.
It's not cathartic.
I'm excited to see where we travel next with Akerman, because like I said before, I think she is a type of director that we've never really covered on the pod. Someone that straddles the 3 realms of narrative, documentary, and experimental filmmaking, and does it so well. So I think whatever film we choose to cover next will still be a eye-opening and interesting viewing experience for me, and I'm sure a very fruitful conversation, because her work just, I don't know, it deserves to be talked about and deserves to be like discussed at length like we have done today.
I think that the thing I want to end on, we talked a lot about like her formalism, the influence of experimental cinema, the command, the craft, her precision, the fact that she knows what she wants. But I was reading this article about her where this person who took a class with her actually said that when she approaches filmmaking, she's actually more instinctual, which feels contradictory to the idea of formalism and of like programmatic filmmaking, of structural filmmaking. But she says that she doesn't have an idea. She has a feeling that she's trying to express. And so even though Jeanne Dielman, very boring, still a film from a very emotional standpoint.
Yes.
And I think something to kind of keep in mind as we kind of continue on watching her works, that she is still, even with her formalist style sometimes, still aiming for feeling, expressing feeling at the end of the day.
Just not a feeling that's typically portrayed on film.
Cool. Can't wait for whatever next one. We haven't decided what we're watching next, but we'll figure it out.
There will definitely be more Akerman coming your way.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to Deep Cut. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts to help others discover the show. A great way to support us is to leave a review for our show or comment on episodes directly on Spotify. You can keep up with Deep Cut on Instagram, Letterboxd, and Twitter at Deep Cut Pod, or follow our TikTok at DeepCutPod_film. And if you want to chat with us and other fans of Deep Cut, come join our Discord server where we talk about movies, TV, music, and share what we're up to. We also have a Patreon. If you want to support us with a monthly subscription, we deeply appreciate it. Click the link in our description or go to deepcutpod.com to find our Patreon, Discord, and all the other socials we mentioned here. Very special thanks to our Patreon Deep Cut Pick supporter, Leah Lai. Happy Mother's Day to you.
Happy Mother's Day.
And
Happy
to
Mother's
also
Day.
our mothers, Ben and Eli's mothers.
Happy Mother's Day.
Who should also become Deep Cut Pick supporters. What's going on, aunties?
They supported by making me exist, by birthing me.
and giving me your life.
I am your mother.
Deep Cut is hosted and produced by us, Wilson Lai, Benjamin Yap, and Eli Sands, and we are produced by our mothers. Our cover art is designed by Justina Yam, and our theme song is composed by the one and only Eli Sands.
I'm Wilson.
I'm Ben.
I'm Eli.
Take care, and we're looking forward to talking about more movies with you next time.
I am your mother. She should have just said that. She would have solved everything. She didn't have to kill a guy.
Oh, but say it to the guy or his son?
I don't know.